In 1950, publishers Bill Gaines and Ed Fiddlestein joined creative forces to reinvent the EC Comics title Crime Patrol. Deciding to include more horror elements into the narratives, crime stories began to take a back seat with issue number 15 of Crime Patrol, which is also the first official appearance of the Crypt Keeper, the iconic host of Tales from the Crypt. Issue 17 saw the title of the book change to The Crypt of Terror. That is until issue number 20, which became the first official Tales from the Crypt comic book. The series ran for an additional 27 issues until the now infamous 1954 Congressional Subcommittee hearings, which focused on the negative effects of uncensored and unregulated comic book stories on the youth of America, which claimed they were to blame for a rise in delinquency and illiteracy. The Comics Code was instituted, and Gaines decided to scrap his crime and horror titles altogether. However, what we are left with is some of the most imaginative and creepy comic book short stories ever to be told. So much so that Warner Brothers and HBO dug up the Crypt Keeper to host the cable television series of the same name, which ran from 1989 to 1996 for 93 episodes. And for those of you in Generation X, you may remember that show and the Crypt Keeper very fondly. In honor of that, let's take a look at the very first issue of Tales from the Crypt and all 4 of the stories therein, and enjoy some straight up suspense and a little bit of horror. But before we do, we'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe, comment, and share this video out. It really helps out the channel each and every week. Thank you. Now, let's turn it over to the Crypt Keeper to take us the rest of the way. Issue 20 features a cover with a man witnessing his own gravestone being chiseled, except his death day is that very day, something the man is just learning for himself. However, first, your favorite Crypt Keeper has a tall tale to tell you, one that is sure to make your blood run cold. A luxurious ocean liner, especially Stateroom 13, combined with strange and unexplained events come together in The Thing from the Sea. You are on a crowded pier. You desperately need to get aboard the Ocean Queen bound for England. You tell the purser that you'll take any berth, any class, and luck would have it, the purser does have one available, if you're not superstitious. For you, it's wonderful luck, and as you get to the top of the gangplank, the giant liner begins to cast off. The steward greets you, takes your bags, and asks you for your room number, to which you reply, 13. The mere mention of this causes the color to drain from the steward's face. His eyes fill with horror as he stares at you. You ask if something is wrong. The steward replies, nothing is wrong. As the steward puts down your bags, he checks the room and edges back to the door. You grab him and demand to know what is going on. Why is he acting so strange? The steward tells you that no one who has ever stayed in cabin 13 has ever finished their journey in it, all of them leaving, one even going mad from what he saw inside. As the steward slips from your grasp and leaves, you turn and think it's all a joke. You stow away your things while wondering if you'll have a roommate for the top bunk. Probably they're up on deck saying goodbye to the good old US of A. You go to dinner, and the combination of a long day, a good meal, and the sea air has made you sleepy. You return to find your roommate already in his bunk. You talk for a moment, share the same story about the steward trying to scare you, and call it a night. Later, you don't know exactly how long you've been asleep, but you are now awake. The room smells damp, and you notice that the porthole is open. You get up to close it. The seawater sprays you in the face as it comes through. Strange, the porthole's been unbolted, and as you reach for the window, a terrible scream emanates from the bed above yours. You turn to see your berthmate leap from his bunk and run for the door, stammering over and over a single word, "No, no, no." You listen to his footsteps as he runs full speed down the corridor. You think to yourself he's probably seasick. You shut the door and fumble back to your bed in the dark to sleep. In the early morning, you are awakened again by a groan from above you. Poor chap, you think, mustn't be a very good sailor. The sun streaming in the porthole wakes you up for breakfast a few hours later. You dress in a hurry. Notice that the curtains in the upper bunk are drawn, and you decide not to bother your mate. He probably isn't in the mood for a meal anyway. On deck, you are approached by the ship's doctor. He asks if you can shed some light on what happened the night before. They found your roommate cowering in a passageway, babbling like an idiot. He's now in the hospital ward, suffering from shock. However, it is you that is now in shock. That means he never came back last night, and if that's the case, you have no idea what is going on. The doctor tells you that he has a large cabin, and maybe it would be best if you brought your things there and spent the rest of the trip with him. But for you, the stories and the rumors about Stateroom 13 are becoming an annoyance. You laugh and refuse the doctor's invitation. You spend the rest of your day swimming, eating, and playing cards. You return to an inviting bed late that evening. You make sure that the porthole is bolted shut before turning in. You lie there awake, wondering about that agonizing scream of your roommate the night before, when you feel the chill and smell the seawater and decay. Unbelievable, the porthole is wide open again? You get up to close it, tighten it with all your strength, and then you hear it. A moan coming from behind the curtains of the top bunk, and the smell of decay is nauseating at this point. You throw the curtains open and reach in the dark. You feel what seems like a man's arm, but it's icy cold and wet. And then you see it, this creature, a clammy, oozy mess, a horrible monstrosity. It hurls itself out of the bunk and stomps out the stateroom door. You cannot believe what you are seeing and you decide to follow it. It's fast, and as you chase through the darkened hallways and dimly lit passageways, the creature makes its way to the companionway, and you watch as it goes over the railing and into the sea. You try to rationalize what you saw. It must be something you ate. You must be hallucinating. You refuse to go back to your room at this point. Under a steamer blanket, you curl up on a deck chair and sleep a dreamless sleep until the blinding sun wakes you. You open your eyes and the captain himself is standing over you. He says he went by your cabin to see you, wants to know if anything is wrong. And frankly, you tell him, there is. He offers to set you up in the officer's quarters, but you are determined to get an answer. There must be a logical explanation, but the captain tells you that he is inclined to board up stateroom number 13. You tell the captain that that will solve nothing. It may be a stowaway, the type of person that needs to be taught a lesson, that he cannot just get away with this type of stunt. The captain agrees and offers to stand watch with you tonight, and the two of you will overpower this individual. You are excited at the idea and relieved that you will not spend another night alone. You spend the rest of the day anxiously waiting for the night to come. The captain meets you at your door at 10 p.m. You decide to go in. You check the porthole. It's firmly latched and bolted. You sit on your bunk and the captain on a chair. You turn out the lights and wait. The only illumination from the moon through your round window. Everything is quiet, almost still. Then, the porthole pops open violently. You rush to close it, and it almost feels as if a powerful force is pushing back on you. You tell the captain that things are starting up again. The captain, however, is face to face with the creature emerging from the bed once again. The captain can't believe it. You shout to him to grab it, but the captain only babbles in fear. He yells out, "No, no, it can't be you. You're dead. I murdered you. I killed you right there in that berth. Pushed you out that porthole into the sea. You can't be." Horrified, you watch. The captain slumps to the floor. The creature, satisfied, throws himself back out the porthole and into the sea. You turn. The captain is dead, literally frightened to death. And when you turn back to the porthole, you see that it is closed again and bolted from the inside. And that's the story, dear reader. Remember, you can never really get away with murder, even at sea on your own ship. And if you ever sail aboard the Ocean Queen, ask for stateroom 13 and tell them the Crypt Keeper sent you. For our next story, we have 4 individuals, all rich, spoiled. They had been everywhere, done everything. Now they will try their hand at magic and brew up a fatal caper. Marilyn Ambers discovers an old book filled with magical spells in an antique bookstore, and as she buys it, she's warned not to use it by the proprietor. Her boyfriend Peter figures it will be more fun than listening to someone recite poetry. Marilyn calls their friends Jim and Winnie to join them that night, and they need to do some shopping beforehand. Toad's tongues, lapwing ears, the foot of a day-old bat just to start. And they bring the items with them so Marilyn can recite the spell above a smoldering cauldron. And as she does this, smoke continues to fill the room. And then Winnie and Peter scream. Jim cannot see a thing. It is too dark and the candles have blown themselves out. Peter tells Jim that some sort of monster appeared, and now Marilyn is in trouble. He begs Jim for help. Marilyn screams into the darkness, her form tinted in a strange green glow. Peter finds the light switch and turns it on, but it is too late. All that is left of Marilyn is a shoe and her stocking. She must have been ripped right out of them. Jim wants to leave and call the police for help, but Winnie and Peter tell him they cannot, that they can save Marilyn themselves. It's just a matter of casting a different spell. Jim looks through the old book and finds what he wants, and the 3 begin again. In the candlelight, Peter can hear Marilyn calling out to him from beyond the grave. Just then, darkness and smoke engulfs the room once more. Peter is dragged down into nothingness as he calls for Jim to reach out to him, but Winnie is in the way, too scared to let go. When the smoke clears, all that's left of Peter is a torn coat sleeve. For Jim, this has now gone too far. Winnie, however, still will not call the police, nor will she allow Jim to leave her alone while he gets help. She insists that the two of them can finish the right spell and bring everyone back. Then, again, they hear Marilyn's voice calling out, begging, "Help us. Look in the book." For Winnie, she knows they are calling from beyond, and they must do what they can to save them. She grabs the spell book and begins to read. By the secrets of the Nine, by the sword of Semek, by the Sphinxed chariot, by the baptism of the 4 elements and the keys to the 50 gates, I summon you. Appear. Bring back what you've taken. And appear it does. An insidious-looking beast reaches out and grabs Winnie, picks her up and slaps Jim to the ground before retreating into the smoke with a third victim. Jim, dazed and weak, crawls to the phone, but before he can pick it up, a fur-covered arm and black-clawed hand takes it away as Jim lets out a guttural moan. Jim collapses, faints before the monster, who carries him off. Jim opens his eyes later on to find himself lying in a coffin, just as the gloating monster is closing the lid. The next sound he hears is the monster nailing the coffin lid shut, and now it's getting harder to breathe. Jim is suffocating. But what Jim does not know is that outside, Winnie, Marilyn, and Peter are having a good laugh as Peter removes the monster costume. It was all a ruse to scare a friend, an elaborate prank. Now it's time to open the coffin back up and let Jim out and get out of the cemetery they've brought him to. Except Peter cannot open the coffin. He was too good at nailing it shut, and now Jim may suffocate for real. There is no time. Peter rushes to his car to get some tools. Meanwhile, as the three of them are away, the local gravedigger begins to wheel the coffin containing Jim outside. Moments later, at Peter's car, Marilyn is immensely satisfied at their work, the scenic effects, the smoke machine. But still, they need to get that coffin open, and Winnie urges Peter to hurry. When they return to the storage shed with tools, Peter reminds them they need to hurry because they still have to replace the dead body they removed when they borrowed the coffin in the first place. However, there is a bigger problem now. They discover that Jim is gone. They quickly wonder, was that coffin slated to be buried? Could Jim have been buried alive? They have to find him. The three search the cemetery far and wide for 30 minutes, but cannot find any freshly dug graves. Finally, they come across the caretaker, and they ask him if he just buried someone. He tells them that he buried them good and deep. The three friends plead for him to dig it back up, that they were just playing a joke, that they need to open that coffin. The caretaker calmly tells him that he wouldn't open that coffin for all the gold in Fort Knox. The man he buried died of leprosy, and anyone who touches the body will surely get it. Winnie, Marilyn, and Peter all look at their hands and see that the disease has already begun to sprout and spread. Our next tale is titled RX Death. Janet and Greg had a miserable childhood. They grew up in poverty and Janet never married. Instead, she lived with her brother, who took on the responsibility of taking care of her. This caused Greg to retreat from the world, to take up academic studies instead, staying up all night poring over textbooks to better himself and their lives. But Greg drove himself hard, and Janet worried it would bode ill for his health, always burning the midnight oil. Finally, one day, Greg agrees to let Janet call the family doctor over to have a look at him, and sure enough, the doctor agreed with Janet. Greg works too hard, eats too hastily, and reads for too long. He writes a prescription for Janet to fill for her brother. Greg insisted that Janet get the prescription filled at an older pharmacy run by an old man with bony fingers. The pharmacist tells her that the prescription contains a rare drug, and that he may have to order it and then deliver the medicine later. That evening, the medicine did arrive. Greg took the first dose before dinner, and then at every meal after. Then one evening, Greg just decided not to study. Then he would go out, take in a show, much to Janet's satisfaction. Janet does not know what time Greg returned that night, but at breakfast he tells her that he met an old college chum, and then he went out again, and the next night, and the night after that. He was now a lover of leisure, of pleasure, and for some reason, this began to gnaw at Janet. Greg continued to go out, and Janet continued to refill his prescription, until one morning, Janet was shocked to see that one of Greg's fingers had withered up and was rotting off. Greg quickly concealed it and told her that he burned it last night, then dismissed himself from her presence. That night, after Greg went out, Janet called the doctor once more, but he was out of town, and when Greg came home late again, his hand was in worse shape, but he merely told her that he had cut it. And besides, why is she prying? Janet was scared at the way Greg snapped at her. He told her to just leave his breakfast at his door the next morning, and she did just that. And then she left the house to see the doctor, who asked her where he was getting his prescription filled, to which Janet replied, the old chemist on Broome Street. Janet and the doctor visited the chemist and asked a lot of questions, including wanting to see this so-called rare drug. The doctor smelled the old musty canister and told them that this is not the drug he prescribed. The chemist was at a loss for words. He's had it for a few years now. When they left, the doctor took the canister with him, and Janet demanded to know what her brother has been taking. The doctor did not know. He will have it analyzed, he told Janet, but he had a feeling it went beyond the realm of science and chemistry. That night, a disheveled-looking Greg came down from his room to leave instructions. He was done with going out. He was going to read. He wanted to be left undisturbed, and his meals left at his door from now on. Janet, out of fear, agreed. The next morning, Janet left Greg his breakfast, and as she was walking down the stairs, she observed Greg open his door for his meal. She could not believe what she saw. Both of his arms were now bandaged. Greg screamed at her and quickly shut the door. Sobbing and confused, Janet called the doctor, but all he could say was that it would be another week for an answer. Several days later, she called again, told the doctor about Greg's bandages and the rotting finger. The doctor agreed to come over right away. After arriving, the doctor examined Greg, after which he stumbled down the stairs, almost fainting and drowning in horror. He had seen and dealt with death all his life, but never like this. He told Janet never to call him again, that there was nothing he could do in this house. Janet became completely distraught. The next day, while outside, Janet gazed up at Greg's room. The curtain was drawn back not by a hand, but by a rotted stump, a beast's paw, the body shapeless, with 2 eyes of burning flame. Janet called the doctor once more, who, having been persuaded by her tears, agrees to come over. While sitting downstairs, he explained to Janet that the drug could not be identified by the lab, but that it most closely resembled digestive enzymes, and if true, then her brother was being digested alive. Just then, something wet fell to her hand. The two of them looked up and saw black ooze dripping from the ceiling. The doctor couldn't believe it would happen this soon. The two race up the stairs and break down Greg's bedroom door, and they were met not with a voice, but with the sound of a wild animal. There upon the floor was a dark, putrid mass, seething, neither liquid nor solid, in its burning eyes. The creature lunged at the two of them, but the doctor struck it with his cane, again and again, over and over, until it lived no more. Our final tale reminds us that, in the spring, a young man's fancy lightly turns to thoughts of impending doom. An artist by the name of Theodore sat back, astonished at the face he had just drawn. He had not even realized he was doing it. Funny, the expression is one of extreme fear. Strange, it's such a wonderful day, why would he draw such a horrified face? And since it's too nice out to work, Theodore decides to just take a walk. Sometime later, Theodore realizes that he's walked about 5 miles and is not even tired. Nothing like the outdoors, but then he hears a noise. He looks down the walking path and determines it must be someone hammering on something outside of that house. As Theodore approaches, he reads the sign that says, Alex Cordova, Unique Stone-Cutting Gravestones, and the sound is coming from around the back. Sure enough, as Theodore explores, he is right. He comes across samples of the gravestones being worked on, and a man squatting and working on a new project. But the man is making so much noise, he doesn't even hear Theodore approaching. But one thing is for sure by looking at the gravestones, the man knows his craft. Theodore decides to peer over the man's shoulder and read the new stone marker. It reads, Here lies Theodore J. Warren, born April 25th, 1922. Theodore cannot believe it. That's his name. That's his birthday. He decides to take a closer look. Born April 25th, 1922, died June 9th, 1950. Theodore lets out a loud "Hey!" which startles the stonecutter. Now, things are extremely strange. The face of the stonecutter is the same that Theodore drew that very morning. He demands to know what is going on. The stonecutter tells him to calm down and asks him what's the matter. Theodore explains that it is his name and birth date being carved. The stonecutter explains that it's just a sample to show to customers. It's just a coincidence. Theodore then wants to know why the death date is today. The stonecutter tells him he always uses the current date when he finishes a sample, like an artist signing his work. But then there's the picture. He shows the man, Alex, his work, to which Alex does say it looks like him. Not very happy, but still a good resemblance. For Theodore, this cannot be coincidence. There must be more to it, but to Alex, he just dismisses it. He doesn't believe in such things. Then, Alex asks Theodore to come inside and meet his wife. She'll get a kick out of the picture. But before he can finish introducing Theodore to his wife blurts out, "Ted!" Theodore recognizes her and calls her by her name too, Ellen. Alex asks if they know each other. And they do, and it is obvious as more than just friends. Ellen begs Theodore to stay for dinner, even asking Alex to agree, which he does. After dinner, Theodore compliments Ellen's cooking, to which Ellen tells him that she is always happy to cook dinner for him because he knows how to appreciate her talents. A comment that upsets her husband very much, and he asks her to stop because it is embarrassing their guest. Ellen's response is harsh, telling Alex to keep quiet, that he's a nincompoop, and that he's stupid. Alex asks Ellen not to argue in front of their guest, but Ellen again tells him to shut up, and that she doesn't know whatever possessed her to marry a fool like him. Alex, having had enough, rises in anger, but Ellen is not through. She tells her husband that he is never going to be anything more than he is. Not like Ted, who's a success. He's young, has money, is handsome, exciting, things Alex is not. Alex is embarrassed. He leaves to go work in a shop. Ellen calls him spineless and tells him never to come back. Now, alone with Ted, Ellen tells him that she cannot stand her husband, especially now that she has reunited with Ted. For Ted, he feels awkward and suggests that he leave. Ellen entices him to stay, and Ted's attitude quickly changes. He does feel something for Ellen, but she's married. The two embrace, remembering their time together years ago, times neither ever forgot. Ellen admits it was crazy to marry Alex, that it should have been Ted, and now it's not too late, and begs Ted to kiss her hard. And although Ted tries to restrain himself, he cannot. The former lovers give in to their emotions. As the two rekindle their love, Alex reappears, holding a chisel hammer. Ellen and Ted turn to see him, Ellen yelling her husband's name, but Alex does not hear her. He is engulfed in pure rage. A few hours later, outside Alex and Ellen's home, onlookers and police gather. The gossip is that Alex Cordova just killed some guy, caught him with his wife, and beat the man to a pulp. For his crime, Alex would receive the ultimate penalty, a meeting with the gallows. His face frozen, the very same horrified look Ted drew the day they met. And for Ted, his gravestone proved prophetically correct. Thus ends the final tale in the first ever official Tales from the Crypt comic book run. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more comic book fun, click on the thumbnail at the end of the video for our look back at the first ever appearance of Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, in the 3-issue story arc beginning with the Amazing Spider-Man number 50, titled Spider-Man No More. Thank you for watching. Remember, I'm still your reluctant gringo from somewhere south of the border. Salud and a huevo.